So yesterday, y'all, we were talking about the Red Scare, correct? Okay. And remember, and I'm sorry it's being cut off on here. I don't know why it's doing that. Those of you in the class, you can see it's cut off. It should be fine on the video. But if I were to turn this off, it would take forever. And we looked at this picture yesterday with obviously the point of view that, hey, we do need to deport these Reds, are these anarchists. And remember, about 250 of these people, including the famous anarchist Emma Goldman, were forcibly deported from the United States, put on a ship, the Buford, which people nicknamed the Red Ark, and sent to Russia. But Russia, it turns out, didn't want them. And in return, instead, they were dropped off in Finland, which was close. Now, okay, Sacco and Vanzetti, right? We went over them a little bit, correct or not? No. Okay, awesome. Good. This will allow me to go ahead and talk about them in some detail. Now, there's always, y'all, going to be some what we call martyrs, or some people would call victims of these various scares. The one you need to know for the first Red Scare, the first Red Scare after the First World War, remember, is going to be Sacco and Vanzetti. Sacco and Vanzetti. Now, this was up in Massachusetts. These men were anarchists. All right, that was one strike against them. They were Italians. It's another strike against them. And a lot of Italians apparently were interested in the anarchist thing. And they had dodged the draft during World War I. So they were like 3-time losers, according to a lot of people. So when a robbery occurred at a paymaster station where they paid workers in Quincy, Massachusetts, and the security guard was killed, as well as the teller was killed, these guys were picked up. Now, the people who did it had masks. So a description was kind of iffy, but these two men were picked up, and there was enough circumstantial evidence, y'all, that there was a trial of these two men. Now, historians today, I have books that say they were guilty. I have books that say they were innocent, right? And I'm kind of the kind that if I read one book and whatever it says, I'm like, yeah, I lean that way. Then read it like, no, now I lean this way. But the thing is, whether they were guilty or not isn't necessarily the most important thing. It was to them, because this is what ended up happening to them. They were electrocuted to death. But to us as a society, what happened is these men did not get a fair trial. There was such a climate of hysteria and fear and sort of nativist feelings against Italians, against people who had the wrong political beliefs, that no jury could probably give these guys a fair trial. And even the judge himself was overheard saying, those two guys need to be fried, basically kind of thing. So the most important thing is they didn't get a fair trial. And of course, this nation prides itself on giving people fair trial. So they have become martyrs. Now,
despite
this is going to mention it just a little bit.
The Roaring '20s was a period of great tension between Americans. Social, racial, and moral beliefs were constantly being challenged. A fear of communism, socialism, and anarchy, fueled by a distrust of any foreigner, led to one of the most notorious convictions and executions in American history. 2 Italian immigrants, shoemaker Nicola Sacco and fishmonger Bartolomeo Vanzetti, were accused of robbing and killing a factory paymaster and a guard. Sacco and Vanzetti admitted to being anarchists, people who want to abolish all forms of government, and to being draft dodgers during World War I. However, both maintained they had not committed the
protesting all over the world to save them.
On the basis of circumstantial evidence, Sacco and Vanzetti were convicted and executed. Their guilt or innocence is still debated today. Guilty or not, the case personified the fear Americans had of immigrants. Some paranoid citizens felt immigrants took jobs rightfully belonging to American
Ellis
citizens.
Island in New York,
Others felt too many immigrants were political radicals.
And, indeed, a lot of them were radicals. But, of course, we took it up to this step and like, oh, if some of them are, then all of them must be. All right. So that was a famous case. Now, I'm going to compare it to this case, y'all. Now, in the 1940s and 50s, after World War II, we have our second Red Scare, and it involves a husband and his wife. These are the Rosenbergs, Julius Rosenberg and his wife Ethel Rosenberg. Now, much like the Sacco and Vanzetti case, this became what we call in the world a cause célèbre, right? It's a French word for meaning a celebrity cause. You know, just like you guys today will see, you know, there's a case, you know, that's out there, and you'll see various television stars or singers will get on television and they'll protest or they'll show up at the jail to try to demand that this person be let free, right? Like recently, this woman who was accused of killing her kid, her baby, a couple, quite a few years ago. Kim Kardashian started speaking up for her, right? And now she's not going to be executed, or at least they've shelved it for the time being. That's what I mean by a cause célèbre. So you want to look smart next time, say, oh, is this going to be the new cause célèbre? Or if you want to be a Texan, say cause célèbre. And people are like, oh yeah, cause célèbre, know what you're talking about. So what happened with these two that you could draw a comparison with? Well, during World War II, her brother, Ethel's brother, David Greenglass, had worked on the Manhattan Project, building the atomic bomb. Now, America was going to have an atomic bomb monopoly. Only America and maybe Britain would have access to this bomb. And so when he was home from leave, he told his sister, he told his brother-in-law about this, and they're like, there's no way only America can have that bomb. If only America has that bomb, the United States has become a tyrant. We got to get this to our Soviet friends. And so he set up a meeting with his brother-in-law, her brother, to basically get as much of the plans as he could. I actually stayed at the house where they did that and had the cool little desk and table where he filmed it. Anyway, but out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. But anyway, y'all, so he gets the plans, and 3 years after we explode the atomic bomb, the Soviets do. And his information, no doubt, helped. Eventually, the brother gets caught. Now, what the FBI did is very, very common. They basically start putting pressure on people you love for you to confess and name names. So they got him, David Greenglass, and they said, look, your wife, she's going to be doing hard time. We might even send her to jail for life. Hell, we might even execute your wife, Ruth, unless you help us out. So what does he do? He cooperates. So he names his sister. He names his brother-in-law. Okay? So they pull in Julius. And Julius, they're like, look, dude, we got your wife in on this. Your brother said she typed up the documents and everything like that. Your wife is going to be executed along with you unless you confess and let us know what, who got you to do this. Who are your contacts? Who are the people that you're getting this information? Who else are spies and all of that? Well, he said, I'm not a spy. I never did any of this. I don't know what my brother-in-law is thinking about. He doesn't like me or something. I'm like, your wife's gonna die. So they put pressure on her. Look, dude, your husband's gonna die. You're gonna go to jail forever. We got the goods on you. And she had 2 young boys. And she said, I'm innocent. I didn't do it. And so literally, y'all, they put them in jail cells next to each other. And I think it was either a Friday or Saturday evening. And they were Jewish, and they had a rabbi there to take their confession just in case. And they both went. He went first, and then she went next. And the first jolt of electricity didn't kill her. It took time to recharge it, and they hit her with more. And finally, with smoke coming out of her pores and steam rising out of there, she died. Terrible, terrible death. All right. So a lot of people around the world, y'all, said, look, there's no way parents would die and let their kids be given up for adoption if they were guilty. And a lot of people, like with Sacco and Vanzetti, said they must be innocent. But we know today, because of what's called the Venona Papers, these are documents that the United States deciphered. They were Soviet coded messages. We know today that he was very, very involved, and she did have a knowledge. She probably didn't deserve to die, but she could have gotten out of it, but she chose not to. So they're heroes to some people. They're traitors to others. So that's another case from the second Red Scare. But like I said, you always tend to have some of these kind of victims. Sacco and Vanzetti maybe weren't guilty. They for sure didn't get a fair trial. Rosenberg's pretty guilty. All right. But around the world, y'all, this is in England, Shepherd's Bush, Wells Road. You see protests all over the place. And of course, America looked bad for executing these two Italian anarchists, right? Okay. Now, members of the IWW, remember that was the Socialist Trade Union, much more radical. These people were attacked. I think I told y'all earlier when we talked about the IWW, the story of Wesley Everett. He was the IWW wobbly guy that they beat up. They threw him off a bridge with a rope around his neck multiple times. They stabbed him, they castrated him, and finally they shot him. And when it was all over, the coroner said he'd committed suicide. Remember that story? Kim, here you go. All right. So, you know, it wasn't a good time, y'all, to be a leftist, right? It wasn't a good time. Here, okay, there he is up there, your message. All right. Now, another thing, y'all, the Attorney General was a man by the name of A. Mitchell Palmer. Here's a picture of him. Palmer, y'all, lived next door to the young Franklin Roosevelt, okay? And one day they got a package, Palmer did, and it blew up, and I think it killed or at least definitely maimed their maid and messed up the front of his house. Now, as Attorney General in charge of this Bureau of Investigation, or over it anyway, Hoover was in charge of it, he begins a series of raids on suspected leftist homes. They are still known to this day as Palmer's raids. And a lot of it was brought on the fact that, hey, they attacked my house. They went after me and my family. We're going to get these guys, okay? So you got a lot of stuff going on here. It's really much more complicated, in the context, I think, is more complicated with the Wall Street bombing and all of that stuff going on, y'all, to get kind of a full picture of how this was going on. All right. So Harding's cabinet, y'all, these are the people that advised the president. Now, he had some of the absolute best people. Herbert Hoover, who would go on to be a very disappointing president, a real tragedy. Hoover had nothing, everything had gone perfect for this guy. He was Mr. Fix-It. You know, they called him Undersecretary of everything else besides Secretary of Commerce, right? So there was Hoover. This guy who's on your notes was Andrew Mellon. Mellon, y'all, was probably the most important Treasury Secretary our country had had since going back to Andrew Jackson's time, okay? And the guy, Nicholas Biddle, that Jackson had all the fights with. Andrew Mellon was like super duper uber rich, okay? And so he didn't need this money, but he knew how to make money. And so he was appointed Secretary of the Treasury. Now, you'll hear this several times, but it's important that you understand the type of economics that he had Harding and later Coolidge practiced. And that was what was called supply side economics. Now, in economics, y'all, you guys probably know the basics. You guys have heard of supply and demand, right? Okay, it's like the big X on the thing. Now, Democrats traditionally, and this is a Keynesian thing going back to Franklin Roosevelt. Keynes was a British economist. Democrats, y'all, target the demand side. Democrats' idea is let's get money, print it, whatever, and we'll get it to people. We'll put money in consumers' hands. Consumers will spend the money. They'll pay their bills. This will get the economy jump-started. That was how we tried to get out of the Great Depression. Republicans on the other side, y'all, they target the supply. So how does that work? They do it through a series of tax cuts. You're going to hear that from, and even Kennedy, y'all, John F. Kennedy, though a Democrat, he got a big tax cut through. What's his name? Eisenhower gets these tax cuts through. Now, taxes had gone very high during World War I for the rich. So the idea is if you cut taxes on the rich, you cut taxes on industry, the economy will get rolling. You know, rich people will buy more, businesses can hire more people, and you and me, we will end up getting a job or maybe get work for our startup business or something like that. Now, critics say it's trickling down. The benefits hit the rich the most, and then they kind of trickle down. One way I saw it explained, y'all, and I thought this was beautiful, and I know I've got it on a PowerPoint somewhere else, is a guy takes a stack of champagne glasses. I don't know if you've ever seen this at a wedding, right? But they'll take a stack of champagne glasses and they'll kind of make them into a pyramid, right? Like, 5 here, 4 here, 3 here, 2 here, and 1 here. And then they'll get a big magnum of champagne and they'll start pouring it. The top glass fills up. What then happens? It trickles down until the next ones fill up. What happens when they fill up? Trickles down to the next ones. And then the next ones. And before long, you're like, all right, everybody, come get your champagne. And, of course, you've spilt a lot, right? A lot of the champagne, went away. But it's a quick way, I guess, to do champagne. Plus, it's kind of cool looking. Anyway, that's kind of what's happening. The benefits are trickling down to you and me. Now, some people, though, that were criticized said they just felt trickled on. Get it? Like urinated on. Okay. Anyway, there. So we'll talk more about that strategy. Now, Eisenhower, like I said, President Kennedy is going to do that as a Democrat, surprisingly, but also Ronald Reagan. Reagan is his policies will be known as Reaganomics. He's going to do a lot of the same thing. And to a lesser extent, Trump was doing that as well, too, cutting taxes on the wealthy and the upper middle class, as well as businesses, in hopes of keeping the economy rolling. That was at least the theory. Charles Evans Hughes had lost the 1916 election to Wilson, and very, very closely. He becomes the Secretary of State, and he's actually pretty good at it. He negotiates this Washington Naval Treaty, and I talk about that in the World War II thing, where we got the world, or the major naval powers in the world, y'all, to cut down the number of ships they had. We set up a ratio. He got other treaties done. So even though everybody sees us as being isolationistic, he was an involved Secretary of State. He just didn't want us committed to any alliance. But we could definitely sign treaties and deals like that. But then, y'all, there were the less successful members of the cabinet. You get Albert Fall. We'll talk about how he basically sold out America's oil to oil companies. This was oil for our Navy that he took a bribe for and then sold them it. And then we get, it's embarrassing, y'all, Harry Daugherty, great Uncle Harry, crook, went to jail. He was a corrupt attorney general who took bribes and everything like that. So, yeah. So why do we focus on these scandals? Oh, here we go. Sorry. The Ohio gang. But my city was gone. Pretenders. Chrissy Hyde, y'all still have a big crush on her. There was no train station. There was no downtown. The song is called Ohio.
Yeah, it's Calvin Coolidge. And the better than your last gonna be.
I had to cut it there, but because he starts dropping bombs. But anyway, there you go. Calvin Coolidge. What a cool name. Okay, anyway. Now, his nickname was Silent Cal because he almost never said anything. I mean, his press conferences were him basically showing up and passing out stuff to the press and then leaving, not even taking questions. He just didn't like to talk unless he really had to. His speeches were super short. He was very knowledgeable about history and political science. He wasn't a dumb man by any means. He just didn't like to talk. Now, remember, he was the running mate of Harding. So when Harding did the decent thing and died in San Francisco, this guy was visiting his dad in Vermont. His dad just happened to be a judge. And he's like, hey, son, you want me to swear you in as president? And he swore him in as president, right? Now, he became famous. The reason he got picked to be vice president, and ultimately it propelled him to the presidency, was the chaos, y'all, that happened after World War I. Now, after World War I, y'all, a lot of workers went on strike. We had like steel workers and this general strike. And it got so bad, very good, that even the police went on strike. Now, you got problems when the police go on strike because who are you going to get to break up the strike? If the police usually do it. Anyway, well, he got on the radio, or as they called it, radio, And he basically said there can be no right by anybody to strike against the public safety anywhere, anytime. And he was able to get them all back to work. And people around the country are like, awesome, I wish our governor would do that, you know? And so this is what propelled him to fame, was breaking up the police strike in Boston. Now, he always looked unhappy. I don't know if even his wife ever saw him smile, right? They said it looked like he'd been weaned on a pickle, right? Just kind of, Well, it turns out, y'all, the poor man suffered for some major, major stomach pain, and he was always in pain or being medicated for it. No wonder. And then this is kind of weird, but I say it, y'all, because as a person who played tennis when I was in high school, and I was awful, okay, but at least I got worse. A lot of my friends kind of made fun of me playing tennis, you know, because they were like jocks. They played football, real sport, muscle sport. People get hurt, break bones, right? I played tennis. And but then I learned the story of Calvin Coolidge's, I think it was his son, maybe it was his daughter. But anyway, the child was out playing tennis and got a blister on the foot. The blister got infected and the kid died. And so I told people, I'm like, you guys say tennis isn't dangerous? People die playing tennis. Yeah, it made me feel a lot better. But not Calvin Coolidge. He felt terrible. Okay, now, remember, he had been vice president for 2 years. Then Harding did the decent thing and died, and he became president for 2 years himself. So then he runs on his own in 1924. I don't know why the word being is split there, but he defeats John Davis, who disappears from history after that point. And it's sort of the last hurrah, y'all, for the Progressive Party that Teddy Roosevelt had started, and Taft and Wilson had all had these progressive ideas. Remember, a lot of Americans seemingly had rejected that in 1920 by picking Harding. But a progressive ran, y'all, in 1924. Now, he was from Wisconsin, which is, of course, one of the big reasons Robert La Follette won Wisconsin. But he didn't win any other states, y'all, but he got a lot of votes. Before it was all over, he had 16.5% of the popular vote, which tells you there were some people, y'all, who still favored some of the progressive ideas. But as you can see, except for the so-called solid Democratic South, the rest of the country, Wisconsin accepted, went with Republicans, and we're very happy with Coolidge. And he probably could have been reelected in 1928. And indeed, his successor, Herbert Hoover, wins in a massive, massive landslide. So people were pretty happy with what Republicans seemed to be doing. Now, an important word you guys need to know is fiscal. F-I-S-C-A-L. F-I-S-C-A-L. Fiscal means money when we're talking government money. Now, Harding, Eisenhower in the 50s were fiscal conservatives. They don't like spending money unnecessarily. Their job was to downsize government, make it smaller, leaner. This is a way you could then cut taxes, right? If you don't have to pay so much for government, then you can cut taxes. So when Congress sent him bills, y'all, requiring lots of money, he would say no. Now, one of the bills, y'all, a lot of people just couldn't understand this. You know, after World War I, we felt very, very proud of our soldiers, as we should. And the idea was, let's thank them in a way. Okay, what can we do? Well, how about we give them some money? You know, not now, but like later on when they're going to need it, like, 20, 30 years from now when they're retiring and, they need some money. And it was going to be a relatively small amount, $500, maybe up to $1,000, depending on how long they had served. Now, he wouldn't have had to pay for it. Congress wouldn't have had to pay for it right then. They weren't going to pay for this, y'all, until 1945, over 20 years away. Just so happened to be the end of the war. He vetoed it. Even though it wasn't coming out of his pocket, his budget, he kind of felt it was like a child. Let's say you're a grandparent and you're kid, okay, I mean your grandparent, your kid just had a baby. So you tell your new grandchild, you know what? Your parents someday are going to pay for all of your college education. And you make a promise. But it's not you paying for it. It's your it's your kid paying for it. And in a way, he thought that was wrong. And so he vetoed it. Ultimately, it did get passed, and it set up a terrible situation, which ended up hurting his successor, because we promised the vets y'all their money in 1945, but it's 1932, y'all. We jump ahead 10 years. The Great Depression is going on. Soldiers are like, I know you told us you'd pay us in 45, but I'm out of work now. My family's hungry. Mr. Hoover, can you pay us the bonus right now? And Congress said, we don't have the money right now. And Hoover said, I can't give you the money right now. And so they marched to Washington, D.C., and they camped there in front of the White House. And it got bad. And finally, Hoover sent in the Army. Now, get the irony. The Army is sent to clear out veterans in 1932. They were known as the Bonus Army. It went bad. Soldiers died. Even a little baby died, y'all, from the tear gas they used. And it doomed Hoover. Hoover probably already would have lost, but it was even worse. And the ironic thing is, I don't know if we ever paid those guys their bonuses. All right, jump ahead to after World War II. Our soldiers come home and we give them the GI Bill of Rights. Hey, we're going to pay for you to go to college if you want right now. Hey, we're going to pay for you if you want to get a loan. You can get a loan. We'll support you to start a business, start a farm, or do something. Maybe buy a house for you and your nice little new wife or something. You know, your nice little kid you got. And so we kind of learned a little bit. But like I said, he's a fiscal conservative, and these were hard choices. And some people weren't very happy with them. Now, after we've had a president, y'all, that has, I'll be honest, kind of embarrassed us or been scandalous, as Harding was. And remember, y'all, it did come out while Harding was alive. But as soon as he died, man, we started hearing about his infidelities. We started hearing about his cabinet members all being corrupt, and it looked really bad. And so even Coolidge's opponents, even Democrats who didn't like his policies, they all sort of agreed the dude is an honest guy. The dude is an ethical guy. And that was kind of important to do that. And after Watergate and Nixon's fall, America turns eventually to a guy by the name of Jimmy Carter. Once again, whether you like Jimmy Carter's policies or not, good, honest man. And, you know, sometimes we kind of need that after we've had just the opposite of that. Okay. Now, it doesn't come up on here. Sadly, it got kind of cut off. But I put this picture on your notes for a couple of reasons. And it's a picture of Calvin Coolidge with, it looks like a Sioux war bonnet on. Right now, these are very, very prized possessions of Indians, right? Of Native Americans, of your Plains Indians. These are eagle feathers, y'all. It's a serious, serious deal. So what had he done to merit this? Well, while he was president, we finally got Native Americans citizenship. They finally got the right to vote. Now, pause for a second. Let's think of the irony here. They're the first here, but they're the last ethnic group to get the right to vote. But that's how it worked. And so he was there visiting a reservation, and they gave him this beautiful, beautiful headdress. And he made a mistake that almost no president has done since then. You know what? He put it on. And he just looked kind of stupid. I mean, look at the picture there. I mean, can y'all kind of tell? Okay. I mean, it's kind of small, but he's kind of like, yeah, you see him there in the black suit? And he looked kind of dumb. Okay. Notice he took off his straw boater hat. I love those hats, by the way. I've got me one at home. He took off his boater hat, which was real cool in the 20s, and put that on. Since that time, y'all, presidents have kind of learned not to do it. All right, jump ahead 40 years. It's November 22nd, 1963, Fort Worth, Texas. A man is sitting down to have a breakfast, and he's getting ready to give a speech. Now, because he's in Texas, Texas is going to give this man a nice big 10-gallon hat, okay? That's what we do. We give it to him, and this man, whose name is President John F. Kennedy, he says, Well, thank you very much. I'll be happy to put this back on when I get back to Washington, D.C. This Sunday, okay? Because he knew. Coolidge looked like a moron with that war bonnet on. I'm not going to look like a moron. Now, the man sitting in front of him, the governor, he wore his hat. 3 hours later, Kennedy's making his way through Dallas. He's shot and killed. Doesn't have a hat on. The guy in front of him, the governor of Texas, has a hat on. He's shot, but he lives. Just think if Kennedy wore that hat, he'd still be alive today. I mean, isn't that good logical reasoning? Yeah, makes perfect sense. Anyway, I just like to tell that story. So anyway, all right, y'all. So the 20s, y'all, is a time of a lot of cultural and political controversies, or if you're Canadian, you'll say controversies, right? A lot of Americans were very nervous about how women should be. What is a woman? How should she act? How should she be? How should she dress? The flappers, y'all, really blew their minds, okay? Modernism, just this whole modern world with all of its electrical conveniences. You know, if God wanted us to have a washing machine, we've been born with the washing machine, you know, kind of thing, right? We're going to make you lazy or whatever. Science, especially evolution, bothered and worried a lot of people. Religion, we're going to see a lot of people kind of turning back to religion. And this is one reason, y'all, I focus on some of the scandals, because, you know, anytime that people see scandals or things going on where they feel like the country is going down the tubes or going down the wrong way, they're like, what's the problem? We're getting too far from this, or we're deserting this, or whatever. Also, we see some issues about race. We'll talk tomorrow about the guy, Marcus Garvey, who's on my shirt today, and his work there that was very influential, not so much in his life, but later on, and of course, immigration. All right, so one thing STAR, and to a lesser extent, AP expects you guys to know, is about the monkey trial, as they called it, the Scopes trial. Now, even though it's the 1920s, these guys had the nerve, y'all, to call it the trial of the century. That is until the next trial of the century, the Lindbergh trial of the 30s, until the next trial later, and then finally the trial of the century with O.J. Simpson. Turns out we had a lot of trials of the century. But anyway, so the thing here, y'all, is this is often misunderstood, and it's often written in a way that is confusing. The way it's often portrayed is this mild-mannered John Scopes is a biology teacher in school. And he's talking in Tennessee, and he talks about evolution. And they come in and they arrest him, man. You're going down. You're teaching evolution. You're going to be doing hard time, dude. Okay? It was a complete setup, y'all. He knew what he was doing. Now, Tennessee had passed a law sometime before making it illegal to teach evolution. This is a way to please the more fundamentalist, your more Christian kind of people who did not like your evolution. And there's still that battle going on, right, y'all? The people that believe in intelligent design, creationism versus those people who believe in evolution, right? You still see some people talking about that today. So they set up a deal, y'all, where he was a member of the ACLU. He was a teacher and tennis coach. Remember, very tough sport. People have died playing it. But anyway, so they set it up where he would teach it and the police would bust him. They would come in and arrest him. And then, of course, they would be able to take this case to the courts, and maybe someday it might even get overturned, this law, even though the law was not really that enforced very much. They didn't like the idea of it because they thought it had a chilling effect on a lot of teachers and stuff like that. So he gets arrested. Now, the town, too, y'all, Dayton, Tennessee, thinks that this will make the town famous. Well, it does, but kind of in a bad way. But even today, y'all, people go to Dayton to do it. And I'll end with this here. And you see the fight there? All righty. Okay. And there's the two names. If you put your papers over here, there's several stacks, and you can just separate them there. We will wrap this up mañana, Spanish for Thursday.